countries are threatened by energy insecurity. France and Germany discovered their vulnerability when, supposedly to teach Ukraine a lesson, Russia cut off the supply pipelines for a day in 2009. Despite these problems, we take energy for granted. When electric power to our home is disrupted, someone must be at fault. If prices rise, someone must be cheating. Access to cheap energy in the United States is a necessity, not a luxury. Many people treat it as a fundamental human right. We hear that we're running out of energy, yet we are inundated with claims that energy is all around, ripe for the picking, a great investment. If only we were smart enough and not being misled by the big energy corporations. There is energy in sunlight, in ocean water, in wind, in the heat that seeps slowly out of the deep earth. We are told that our dependence on fossil fuels is really just an addiction, manipulated by drug pushers known as oil companies. We need energy, but we are profligate with the energy we have. Large lecture halls at UC Berkeley, where I teach, use artificial lighting, even in midday. We overheat buildings in winter and overcool them in summer, and it feels luxurious to do so. Energy conservation has a bad name, associated with underpowered automobiles, harsh fluorescent lighting, and having to wear sweaters in our own living rooms. Energy is at the heart of our national security, both military and economic, and it is central to the decisions made not only by presidents but also by citizens. Yet energy is abstract and mysterious. Physics books define it as the ability to do work, but that doesn't help unless you understand the technical definitions of ability and work, and those turn out to be equally abstract. We are told to conserve energy, but physicists tell us that conservation of energy is not a choice, but a law of nature. Energy can be very confusing. What does a future president really need to know about it? When you become president, can't you simply let your Secretary of Energy or your science advisor handle the energy issues? If only it could be that simple. Imagine the following two plausible scenarios. Your science advisor extols the virtues of solar power, at the same time that your economic advisor frets about the demise of the U.S. automobile industry, and your Secretary of State is desperate about a revolution taking place in an oil-rich country like Saudi Arabia or Iran. Knowledge about energy is key for tackling all of these questions. Your Secretary of Energy thinks that the nuclear reactor disaster at Fukushima was so horrible that it should be the death knell of nuclear power. But your science advisor says there is no tsunami danger in the United States. Nobody was killed by the radioactivity released, and the accident illustrates the robustness of nuclear power. You have to balance the advice and make the decision, but reconciling the disagreement seems impossible. How can you reach the right conclusion when your advisors disagree? The answer, of course, is that you have to understand not only their conclusions, but also the facts and logic that drew them to those conclusions. We live in a high-tech world, and you can't govern by simply knowing the kind of economic, political, diplomatic, and military information that the presidents of old could use to get by. You need to know and understand energy. And even tougher, you have to lead the public and Congress. You can't operate by taking polls, because the public may not appreciate the subtle balance of all the issues. The buck stops with you. The goal of this book is not to give advice, but to educate. I will occasionally give my opinion, but beware, it is the opinion of a scientist, and when you are president, I won't be surprised or disappointed if you take a different path. At least, it will be an informed path. I've made this book terse rather than comprehensive. I've emphasized the essentials, the things that the president most needs to know, the fundamental science and information that serve as the entry to deeper understanding. The book begins with a fresh look at some recent energy disasters. These events make headlines, and those headlines often define the public attitude toward energy. Yet the headlines often turn out to be inaccurate or misleading. In the months and years following a disaster, we often learn that our first impressions were wrong. That is certainly the case with the Fukushima nuclear disaster, with the Gulf of Mexico oil spill, and even with much of the public perception of the effects of fossil fuels on global climate change. The second part of this book covers the energy landscape, which is changing with remarkable rapidity. All our modes of transportation, autos, trucks, airplanes, depend on liquid energy, oil, diesel, fuel, gasoline, yet we are running perilously low on domestic supplies. There is a windfall in the availability of natural gas, but can we run our cars on it?